This conference will now be recorded.
I'm calling to order the November 18th, 2024 meeting of the Town of Auburn Select Board. This open meeting of the Town of Auburn Select Board is being conducted both in person and remotely, consistent with Chapters 107 of the Acts of 2022, which suspends the physical requirement of open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed to participate remotely as long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. For the public to join the meeting remotely by telephone, dial 408-650-3123 with access code 235-235-861. Or the public can join via computer at global.gotomeeting.com/join/235-235-861. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the town's website. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. This meeting is being recorded by Auburn Cable Television. Is there anyone else recording? Seeing none, could we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have no one signed up for public comments. We don't have any community organizations, so we'll be moving along to number 5, presentations and public hearings. Is there a motion to open the public hearing for the tax classification?
So moved.
Is there a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The chair is a yes as well. I will hand it over to you, Seth, for your presentation.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of the Select Board. Welcome to the fiscal 2025 classification presentation. May need some help from John, sorry. The one above? Okay. Just click down, okay. All right, just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. Most people have seen this before, and the presentations are roughly 32, 33 slides long. I'm going to go through the entire presentation. If you could just hold questions until the end, that would be appreciated. Some of the slides have a lot of historical data on there. So if we go to a slide that has 15 years of historical data, I might not go over every single year. We can certainly do that at the end if you'd like. And I would just ask that after all the votes are taken tonight, that if the Select Board could come and sign off on the factors that they have selected tomorrow. I don't know the availability, but the sooner they sign off on it, the sooner we can submit the recap and get certified by the state. So we should be done, I would think, late morning, maybe, Karen, with the recap, hopefully. So I'm going to get started. Introduction. The calculations for the tax rate and other numbers are estimated as of the time of preparation. There may be additional informational slides, including in the handouts, that are not part of tonight's presentation. The purpose of the classification hearing is to allow a shift in the tax burden between property classes. This does not change the total tax levy for the community. It simply determines the share to be borne by each class. What the classification hearing does not do, it does not determine the tax rate for the town. It only determines the distribution. Classification does not determine how much money can be raised. That is determined at the town meeting. Your tax rate. The levy is determined by town meeting appropriations and expenditures, state and county charges, It is paid for by using town revenues, excise fees, enterprise, and other available funds, total taxable real estate and personal property, state aid and reimbursements, new growth, and debt exclusions and overrides. The role of the assessor is to value property for purpose of equitable taxation, administer abatements and exemptions, and be a resource to the taxpayers, and explain the classification options to the Select Board. Overview of the revaluation presentation. Residential properties are adjusted annually, and we were in a revaluation in fiscal 2025, to full and fair market value. Attributes affecting value include style, condition, interior and exterior features and sizes, primarily of residential properties. Commercial and industrial values are based on an income approach to value per the Department of Revenue guidelines. Personal property is a blended value and/or a fair cash value approaches are generally used to determine those values. There's going to be 4 votes at the classification hearing. There's a residential factor, shifts the rates between the residential and commercial industrial. Open space discount, we do not have any open space in Auburn. The residential exemption shifts the burden within the residential class, and the small commercial exemption shifts the burden within the commercial and industrial classes to give a discount to qualifying properties. This is a slide that represents the percent of levy for 4 different property classes, kind of a snapshot in history of fiscal 2010 versus fiscal 2025. And as you can see, the residential is 76.7 in 2025. In 2010, it was 73% and some change. So it's fairly similar. The tax levy is determined by last year plus new growth plus 2.5%. The maximum allowable levy is the levy limit plus debt exclusion plus overrides, and the excess levy capacity is the levy limit minus the actual levy. Fiscal year 2025 levy limit calculations. Fiscal 24 levy limit was $54,686,551. Fiscal 25 2.5% allowable levy increase was $1.367 million. The fiscal 25 growth was $822,061. There was no override. So the 2025 levy limit is $56.875 million. Fiscal 25 debt exclusion was $1.456 million, and the maximum allowable levy for FY25 is $58,331,939. Fiscal 25, what factors drive the tax rate? The Auburn Middle School, that debt exclusion is being retired in roughly 12 years. Demolitions, properties going off the tax rolls due to demolitions from snow damage, fire damage, or other causes. Properties becoming exempt. Acquisitions by the town. Example would be Chuck Steakhouse. Or purchases of parcels by exempt organizations. Fiscal 25 growth trends. Residential growth is steady, mostly stable, not as subject to being skewed by individual properties, because the vast majority is residential. Notable is apartment projects in fiscal 25. Commercial growth is steady. Numbers can be affected annually by one significant new property or addition, because it's a smaller class code. Industrial growth has increased. Numbers can be affected annually by one significant new property or addition. Example would be 12 West Deck Drive. Personal property growth is up. Numbers are volatile. They can new growth from businesses every year moving into town or moving out of town, so it can fluctuate. This slide, slide 14, is the new growth. It's kind of a 5-year trend. And if you look at fiscal 25, you can see our personal property was up The industrial was up, commercial slightly down, and the residential was up. I would say residential primarily was due to 26 Albert Street, the new apartment complex, 324 units coming somewhat online, partially online. Personal property has increased, and commercial industrial is stable this year, primarily due to West Tech Drive and warehouse completions additions. Slide 15, residential value percentage change due to revaluation from fiscal '24 to fiscal '25. I'm going to focus again on the fiscal '25 versus fiscal '24. So in fiscal '25, the overall residential class change in aggregate was 4.9%. The single families were up 4.5%. Condos were up 10.7%. 2 and 3 families were up 1.1%. Vacant land 2%, and apartments 4 and up were increased over 10.4%. So this slide talks about voting on the residential discount. It's up to a 20% discount to owner-occupant residential properties. Shifts the burden from less expensive homes onto higher-priced homes and non-resident or non-owner-occupied homes. This primarily works in communities with large numbers of vacation homes or non-owner-occupant properties. Example would be Cape Cod. Traditionally, the Board of Selectmen have not adopted this, and it's really for vacation communities. The vote on the small commercial exemption, which has been a tradition in Auburn. The final vote of the Board of Selectmen is for the commercial exemption. It has no effect on the residential and personal property. Industrial properties do not qualify, but they do share the tax burden for the exemption. The exemption goes to the property owner, not the business itself, and it relies on the trickle-down effect. So there's a vote on the small commercial exemption, continued. It's for businesses and single-tenant properties, all must qualify. So if there's multiple businesses on that parcel, they all must qualify. The value of the parcel must be less than $1 million, and each business within that resides on that parcel must have less than 10 employees to get the small business exemption. If adopted, it shifts the tax rate up to 10% by annual vote between properties occupying by qualifying small businesses onto other commercial and industrial properties. Applications are taken after the classification hearing, and processing can delay setting the tax rate. Any exemptions not processed prior to submission of the recap will impact the overlay account. This is an example of applying the small business exemption to Auburn. In this slide, it assumes a $18 per thousand commercial industrial tax rate. So if you look on the left side, you have a commercial parcel valued at $250,000. With the exemption, their annual real estate tax would be $4,050. Without the exemption, it would be $4,500. And the difference is a net savings of $450 to the parcel owner. And then it kind of goes down the gamut here at $500,000, $750,000. And $1 million, that's the cap for the value of the parcel. Doesn't qualify after that. Historic trends of the selected rate. You can see the corresponding fiscal years. And it has come closer and closer to a single rate over the years, with last year, 2024, being 1.09. Commercial, industrial, and personal property growth trends as the factor has changed. So I'm going to go down to, if you look at fiscal 2024, we had $721,064 in new growth, and the residential growth was $324,768, which as a percentage was 45.01%. And the commercial, industrial, and personal property new growth in fiscal '24 was $396,296, which was about 55%. And the factor chosen last year was 1.09. So you can see in fiscal '25, we had more growth. That was, again, primarily due to the Albert Street project. Residential was up, represented 42% of the growth in fiscal '25, and 475,231 was commercial, industrial, and personal property, and that represented 57.81%. Fiscal '24, we don't have all the figures for everybody's fiscal '25 tax rates and certified values, so we go off of last year's. If you look at the example in the bar graph here, this assumes a parcel that has a value of $1 million, and you can see that Worcester has a commercial rate of $30.04. It would cost them over $30,000 in taxation. And Auburn has a $16.81 commercial rate for fiscal '24, so it would cost roughly $17,000. Those are the only two communities for fiscal '24 that had split tax rates. All the other communities had a single rate. This is the rate chart for fiscal '25. So this rate chart does assume that a small commercial exemption will be adopted at 10%, as is custom by the Board of Selectmen. But as it sits right now, the town is at a 1.09 factor, and that would produce a residential tax rate of $14.29. It would produce a $16.10 commercial and industrial rate, and a $16.04 personal property rate. As you move up and down the ladder, it varies by about, from the residential standpoint, about 4 cents per factor. Just as an example, the impact of splitting the tax rate on the average property in fiscal '25. So I'd like to call your attention to the average value of each piece of real estate. So residential value, the average residential value this year was $420,277. The average commercial value is $1,301,119. The average industrial was $2,369,283, and the average personal property account was $130,531. And if, excuse me, if you look at the taxes as it sits right now, they're highlighted in yellow at the 1.09 factor. The average residential bill would be $6,006. The average commercial bill would be $20,948. The average industrial bill would be $38,145. And the average personal property bill would be $2,094. Now, if you shift the rate, just for space purposes here, I went 2 factors on each column. You would see the corresponding annual tax bill for each corresponding class. On the next page, it gives you a little bit more of a breakdown. So you can see on the residential class, if all things being the same, if it stayed at 109, it is what it is. But if you moved it to 1.11, the average taxpayer would save $42 a year. Conversely, if you moved it to 1.07, the average residential parcel would pay $38 more per year. But you could see underneath the corresponding commercial, just by moving that would save $390, and the average industrial would actually save $852. And that's because of the smaller class size. The effects of splitting the rates on commercial industrial assessments, if you had two different properties and you were just looking at them, property A, if they had a higher tax rate, they would have a lower net operating income, which is determinant of the value, so it would result in a lower assessment. Property B, if they paid lower taxes, then they theoretically would have a higher net income. That would result in a higher assessment. So, you know, as a footnote, higher taxes generally have a negative impact on commercial industrial. This slide here is kind of some local towns that are in the area. We seem to get compared to Shrewsbury a lot. And you can go down and you can see the average value. This is for fiscal '24, because the fiscal '25 weren't available for everybody yet. But you can see the corresponding municipality. You can see the corresponding average single-family value, the town's tax rate for fiscal '24, and on the right side, it produces the average tax bill in each town for the residential class. This slide here, 29, is the kind of the average Auburn residential bill versus the state average. Again, these were for fiscal '24, so Auburn's is just about $6,000, a little over $6,000. State average is about $7,400. Auburn home value trends. The average single-family home in Auburn for fiscal 2025 is assessed at $420,000, $277. Excess levy history. The town can tax up to 2.5%. This is a slide that kind of speaks for itself. So over the last 14 years, the town administration has not taxed to the 2.5%, and it saved overall more than $67 million by not going all the way to 2.5%. We do offer exemptions to the town for elderly, veterans, blind, surviving spouses. Along with that, if you qualify, you get a discount or potentially get a discount on your trash and your sewer as well. And this is the factor sheet. I do have some extra sheets up here. It didn't come out as well as I thought on this slide, but it's just a bigger representation of what we saw in the middle of the presentation about the factors going up or down. And that pretty much concludes the slideshow.
Thank you. Do members of the public have any questions or comments? Please.
Seth, is it fair to say that with the split being using one, that the rate would decrease overall for residential as well?
If it was a single tax rate?
Correct.
If it was a single tax rate, it would be $14.71.
Is it a decrease from the current year?
Yes, $14.90, yes, it would be, correct.
Are there any other public comments? Do board members have any questions?
Thank you for the presentation. Sorry I didn't ask this. I know we met previously. Do we know what the median home value is? I know you have average on your slide. Just want to know if you guys are aware what the median value.
No, that's the mean. I don't have the median off the top of my head, sorry, but. That would be something I could certainly research. I just don't have the figure.
No, and it just came to me now. I wasn't trying to put you on the spot. If you have
Sure.
it, it'd be great. But I do know with some of this growth that the cost of homes are going up, and there's quite a few homes on the market for over 800,000. So I see 420,000, and I don't know if that's representative of every neighborhood, or, that's why I'd like to know in the future.
Yeah, that's something I could certainly track down. I wouldn't be able to, I'd have to do some search and probably take some time to get that. But, yeah, we typically, the presentation has always gone off of the average, but I can certainly track down the median for you.
No, like I said, it just came to me. Otherwise, I would have asked it prior to this, so thank you.
Sure, if you just like to come up.
I mean, it's quick, the median home value is
339? And that's based on 2024 data?
Thank you.
Okay, so not terribly far off, at 420.
Thank you, Brooke.
Thank you. Do board members have other questions?
I have a couple questions. Can you just restate that question again? If we went to a no split, same tax rate, the sheet we have says that the residential would be 1471, and the current is 1429, is that correct?
1493 is the current fiscal '24.
That would be if we did no change
Okay,
for 2025.
okay,
But on another page.
okay. Couple other questions. What would we gain if I know we traditionally do not do the residential exemption, but what type of savings would owner-occupied residences have if we did actually do a resident exemption compared to non-owner occupied?
That's something that we would probably have to look into and work in conjunction with the town clerk to find out exactly how many are owner-occupied. I mean, I'm just going with a guesstimate here. It's probably 85, 90%, so I don't know if it would, or more. So I don't know if it's never been kind of approached by the select board before, but we could certainly look into it. But I would think as a percentage of single-family homes, it would be a very, very small percentage that were not owner-occupied.
Okay. The other question I had is, with respect to the senior and veteran work-off program, the description on page 32 says the rate of $10 an hour. I thought we had raised that last year.
If I may, yes, we did. We proposed to increase that to 15, and that would go into effect on this new cycle. The outreach was made this fall. I don't know, do we have the final numbers on who had applied for that, Lisa?
Who would apply, you mean this year?
Yeah.
Past, we had 3 workers.
Right, but the cycle opens up in the fall for application?
Who's coming?
Yeah.
That I don't know.
Okay.
Okay.
So
but
we're
it is gonna
hoping
be
because we
15.
raise the hourly rate with less hours worked and with an extended benefit from 1,000 to 1,500, that we would be able to attract more individuals.
Okay. So I just want to make sure that I wasn't misremembering that we had taken that action compared to this.
Madam Chair, if I can just ask, because people at home can't hear us, and we get yelled at if we don't speak into the microphone, so if people want to press the board so people at home can hear us.
Thank you. Are there any other comments?
I have another.
Certainly.
Sorry about that.
No.
As far as the small business exemption, I know there's a lot of qualifiers. I know this board has talked about trying to increase them. Do we know how many properties qualify for the small business exemption at this time?
We have 61 properties currently in fiscal '25 that qualify.
I just have a follow-up question. If we were to raise that, I know we had talked about raising this, and we now have a subcommittee working on that. If we were to raise it to 5 million, what would that look like property-wise?
Again, it probably takes some further digging into it, because off the top of my head, I don't know how many properties are valued from $1 million to $5 million. But we could certainly, do some more research. My guess is there's roughly 450 commercial properties, and 61 qualify as under the conditions now. My guess is if that went into effect, it may open it up for another 40, 50, possibly.
And I know that this relies on the quote-unquote trickle-down effect. Do we have any evidence that it's actually trickling down?
No, yeah, the only thing I can say is a lot of the tenants have triple net leases, so they're responsible for their portion, but exactly what that portion, that percentage is, I don't know off the top of my head, and sometimes the leases they're kind of vague if provided at all, so it's a little gray.
Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, is there a motion to close the hearing?
So moved?
Can I just ask, is there any statements or comments from the public before we close the hearing? Normally, I know the members of the chamber like to provide public comment.
Sorry.
Sure, yeah.
Becky, you can come up here if you want.
Presentation, if that's okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That's
I didn't think.
there, and then,
It's a public hearing.
Okay.
good?
can be in
You're a
charge.
seasoned veteran?
Thank you.
Okay, sure.
I'll just shrink you.
Yeah.
No worries.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to address the Select Board tonight. My name is Jackie Farron. I'm a 12-year resident of Auburn, homeowner, and community leader in town. I'm the controller at Atlas Distributing and board member of the Auburn Chamber of Commerce. Tonight I want to talk about community, a community where most of us live, work, and raise our kids. A community that has a legacy of embracing business, growth, while still maintaining a small town feel. We are strong, we are successful, we are proud. And like so many communities across the Commonwealth and the country, we are feeling the impact of rising costs on our budgets. I come before you tonight not as a resident and not as a business leader, but as a member of the Auburn community, asking you to implement a tax strategy that will allow us to see relief in the coming fiscal years. A strategy that has been proven to promote revenue growth and create an environment of community improvement. I'll show you how this strategy has been effective in communities around us and how your actions over the last few years are already working in our community. But first, let's look at how Auburn, through the help of the Chamber, comes together to support each other. Through the School Business Partnership, Liaisons for all Auburn schools and Bay Path award grants to teachers who seek extra funds to deliver creative learning opportunities to their students. This year, we awarded $4,800 in grants to each of the schools in the partnership. We award nearly $20,000 in scholarships every year to seniors at Auburn High and Bay Path. These funds are raised by business leaders and residents coming together to donate their time and money. We make impactful donations that address needs and fund organizations in town. Collectively, the businesses we polled over the last week reported annual donations of over $50,000 to these organizations. This represents less than 10% of the total businesses, so we know that the total number is even more impactful. And most importantly, we're a community that recognizes the importance of small businesses and collectively supports them, and we want more of them. These are just a few of the examples that what we do as a community, and we have big plans for 2025 as well. The way to maintain this level of support and experience a decrease in our tax expense as a community is through a unified tax rate. We've seen this work in neighboring communities. One Central Mass town saw a dramatic decrease in their tax rate after only 3 years, and today have a unified rate that is $3.21 lower per thousand. Comparatively, we have a stronger community, a higher average income to support small businesses, and more attractive locations to welcome them to. Imagine what we could do in Auburn. Over the last several years, you've shown dedication to obtaining a unified rate, and we're seeing the results. The commercial industrial sector contributed an average of 70% of the annual growth in revenue for the last several years, and fiscal 2024 saw 11% growth in industrial revenue alone. You've signaled that we're a pro-business community that not only welcomes businesses, but supports them. With the current structure, we're at a disadvantage compared to neighboring towns with single tax rates. Seth showed that on his slide. We're one of 2 remaining in our area. And as residents, we're unable to grow revenue at a pace that will lower our rate. Your vote to move to a single tax rate for fiscal 2025 will boost job creation for the hundreds of teens and seniors looking for employment, reduce operating costs so we can continue to support our community organizations, and send the message that Auburn is a community where residents, shops, and independent businesses truly can be successful. Thank you for your leadership and continued support of our amazing community. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, comments from the board or the public? Seeing none, is there a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The chair is a yes as well. So we have 4 votes that we need to take. Do we want to start with the, let's go backwards on our list. We'll start with the small commercial exemption. Is there a motion?
Motion we adopt.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The chair is a yes as well. We're going to go to the residential exemption. Is there a motion?
Motion not to adopt.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
The chair is yes as well. We're moving to the open space discount.
Motion not to adopt.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? The chair is a yes as well. And finally, the selection of the residential factor. I just have a comment on this before there is a motion. While I am committed to lowering the tax rate for businesses, I do have concerns that if we move too far, we are asking the town to fund a fire station in the near future, and that would be an open vote. So my concern would be if residential rates raise, that that might possibly not go through.
So I think it was stated that the residential rate would actually be less if we went to a single, which is true. It would go down to $14.71 from the $14.93. But I think this board has shown commitment over time to make a gradual move towards that. And I think if this board would be willing to do a 1.06 factor, that would reduce that number to $14.43, which is 50 cents less than the current per valuation, and would be about a $59 annual tax increase on the residents, which is still an increase, but a lot less than going to that full. I think it'd be 130 plus, which is a large burden to get all the way down to that single rate. I don't know if the other board members are in favor. I know previously in my time, we did start, I think, at a 1.12. We've been moving 3 points each year, and I'd like to see that continue. I mean, I'm obviously would like to get to that single rate, but I think the board's policy so far, or willingness to move in the right direction and not take it all in one bite has proven to be effective.
So, Madam Chair, may I?
Certainly.
So, I share the chair's concern. For me, that over the next year, the more stable, the better. Not only are we going through an administrative change here with our departure of a longtime town manager and assistant town manager who knows our finances inside and out and has a certain level of credibility and experience, where everybody trusted Ed's hand on the reins. We are losing that. There is also a change in the federal administration. Regardless of how you feel about that, the indications are clear that there will be funding cuts in terms of different aid programs that usually trickle down to the municipal level through the state. But those are unknown at this time. Add in the third factor that we will be going for the voters in May and for a 2.5 override that is, I don't think is a slam dunk at this point in time, for a new fire station that is deeply, deeply needed. Anyone who doubts that can go take a tour of the West Station. And if they're at the end of the tour, they say it's not needed, I'm going to call them a liar to their face. Quite frankly, it is deeply needed. But I'm not so sure that's actually going to happen. And I think if we are to make any changes one way or the other, that puts that at risk. We have moved down, as Mr. Chambers said, 6 points essentially in the past 2 years. That's a big jump. You know, in previous years, we have done a couple changes and then leveled out for a year and then started changing again. I think that that is a safer approach that I'm more comfortable with going into this next year. I don't want people to think that I'm not pro-business. I'm not supporting new growth. I am. As the chamber knows, there are a whole host of things that I think the town needs to be doing a lot better when it comes to providing the support in economic development, for bringing in new investors, to bringing in new companies, new businesses. It is not a matter of a lack of opportunity or a lack of trying by our staff. It's a lack of resources that we dedicate to that staff in that office, quite frankly. And I think that, you know, for me, whoever is the next town manager, as they're going through that interview process, that's going to be the one thing that I'm going to be hitting them on and asking, quite frankly, is what are their plans for economic development and support of our businesses. But for this year, the more stable, the better. So I am not in favor of changing it at this time.
Would any other board members like to make comments?
Madam Chair, may I? I think another .03 change in the rate is going to be too much, and that's asking too much of our residents. I hear what Todd is saying. There's some uncertainties on funding from the federal level. We're going to turn around and ask for a fire station that's very, very needed. And I'm not sure if we can do that at the same time as showing that we split that, close that gap by .03. I'm in favor of a .01 change.
If I may, you mean going to .08 for a rate?
No, I'm saying we're at 1.09 now. I'd say go to 1.08. I make a motion that we change the tax rate, the split to 1.08.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
No.
The chair is a no as well. Is there another motion?
Make a motion, we retain the rate at 1.09.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? The chair is a yes as well. Thank you so much. There will be documents we need to sign as
Yeah, could I just say one more thing? On the small business exemption, you actually have to vote, it's 1 to 10%. I mean, we've done 10%, but if
Okay.
you wanted to vote a factor of like 5, but traditionally it's been a 10%
Okay.
exemption on the total assessed value of the commercial property.
Make a motion that it's set at 10%.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The chair is a yes as well. Okay, so thank you so much. Is there anything else?
So we'll try to have all the recap information in Gateway probably by noon time tomorrow, so I don't know if you want us to contact you, but we'll need Select Board members to sign off on the factor that they've selected, so hopefully that can start in the afternoon tomorrow.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Moving along, we have no departmental items. We have no communications. For Select Board general items, we have no proclamations or recognitions. We have no gift acceptances. We are now on number 9, the town manager items. Now, I'll hand it over.
Madam Chair, thank you. I know we had a discussion about a process for the potential hiring of an outside professional recruiting firm that would guide the Board of Selectmen through the hiring of the next town manager. And we wanted to bring that to a vote. But in doing so, I think the board needs to consider, I know there was some discussion, but I don't think you took a position on this as to whether or not they wanted a component. And it appeared to me that there was not support for there was discussion about not having a search committee. But most RFPs I have seen, and I've talked to some of the firms, there typically is a screening committee involved in the review of the applications, but it's not necessarily required. So there are communities out there, more than not, that utilize a screening committee, but I've been told there are communities who strictly go with a recruitment firm who vets out the applications from start to finish. And so that is a possibility as well. So I'm looking for a little guidance in the formulation of that RFP as to whether or not recruitment only, or there would be a component that would include a screening committee.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. So the screening committee, you're saying, would be composed of people, maybe people from the Select Board and other members of the community. Would that be an open meeting? Posted
No,
open
the
meeting?
screening committee is allowed to review the applications in confidentiality to protect the individuals who are applying for the position. At some point, when it's determined that there is a consensus on applicants that are going to be forward to the board, it becomes public at that point.
So my question is, that assumes that the screening committee is appointed by an administrative action by the town manager. If the select board was to vote to create a screening committee, we are voting to create another public committee that is subject to the open meeting law.
That is correct.
So that is my concern, so that I think it's necessary that if we do want a screening committee, we can certainly offer our advice on what that screening committee looks like, but it's going to have to be a committee appointed, sort of a working group that's appointed by administration. I just want to make that very clear. The alternative is that we go the 100% professional route, where we provide within the RFP the criteria we want in the candidates to come forward, and they do a professional vetting based on that criteria, and we may get 3, we may get 5, we may get 15 that meet that criteria, that are then brought forward, and then we'll have to choose to where we go from there.
I believe that criteria would be set under either scenario. The board would be asked, what is it looking for in its ideal candidate?
Yep.
Are there any questions or comments?
So
Is there a motion on,
Make a motion that we go with an RFP without a screening committee.
I'll second that.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The chair is a yes as well.
Madam Chair, I'm also asking that the board vote to appoint Dory Vecchio as interim town manager upon my retirement, in accordance with Section 3.05 of the Charter.
Make a motion that we appoint Dory Vecchio as interim town manager upon the
Second.
retirement of the town manager.
Second.
Is there a date associated with this? I just want to make sure for clarification when that position is fully turned over.
So my intended date, as I had conveyed to the board on October 28th, would be January 31st of 2025.
I'll include January 31st at close of business.
Yeah, I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The chair is a yes as well.
And the board may want to consider a vote to authorize either the chair and/or the chair and the vice chair typically to enter into negotiations for such interim agreement for the time that Dory would be serving as interim town manager. Certainly, I will come up with a timeline in terms of the RFP and lay out a format that would guide the board in terms of an appointment date of its next town manager. Probably looking sometime, maybe May of 2025.
So can I just ask one question? Because I was not on the board when this happened last time. Does that contract, when we do take a final vote, does that have to come back and get voted on by this board, or is it simply the two members?
I think it would have to be voted by the board in
Okay.
its entirety, yes.
My only question is, does the chair and vice chair want to be the negotiating committee, or would they want volunteers? That's just my only question.
I am not opposed to being part of the negotiating committee, but if anybody felt strongly like they wanted to be, I would happily,
Comfortable with you two doing it?
okay.
So am I, yeah.
Make a motion that we appoint the chair and vice chair to a negotiating committee for an agreement for the interim town manager.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The chair is a yes as well. We have no table items. We have no member items. We do have a second public comment. Is there anybody signed up for the second public comment? It does not appear there is. We have no meetings. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The chair is a yes as well. We are adjourned.